welcome to episode 2 of the Rant of a Red Devil podcast. A few things we're going to get covered today, mainly this week in football. Well, the only football that matters, Man United. So we'll start with the response of United to obviously the main crisis that's going on at the moment, the COVID-19 crisis. United have... We wrote an article on site about it, but basically, let's find it. United have pledged the use of Old Trafford to emergency services. They have pledged the use of vehicles and drivers to transport COVID patients. They've also done more, but I'll be honest, I can't find it and I can't remember what it was. Let's see if we can find it quickly. No, can't find it. Anyway, basically, Manchester United have pledged a lot of resources and the use of Old Trafford to the fight against COVID-19, as well as paying all non-playing and match day staff in full. I think that's something that really does need to be applauded, because when we look at what other clubs have done, Chelsea as well, I think what they've done needs to be applauded. I'm not a Chelsea, don't like Chelsea at all by any stretch of the imagination. I can't stand the football club, but credit where credit's due. Roman Abramovich has done a lot from Chelsea's point of view. For this COVID-19 battle, he's allowed NHS staff to stop at the hotel, etc., etc. There's a list of other things, but I can't remember what they are. But he has done a lot, and I think that really does need to be applauded. Like I say, when we look at what United and Chelsea have done compared to other clubs, Tottenham, Newcastle, Bournemouth, all furloughed staff. Norwich as well have furloughed staff, I believe. Non-playing staff anyway. And Liverpool, let's get started on them. They came out in the press and said they were going to furlough their non-playing staff. The media and the public absolutely slated them. And they then U-turned the decision, and their fans took to Twitter to request praise for the way that Liverpool reversed the decision that shouldn't have been made in the first place. So that's how they responded to the situation. I mean, from a United point of view, I think it's a massive PR exercise. It's an easy win for them. They've come out of this smelling of roses just by coming out straight from the word go and saying, we will not furlough our staff, we will pay them. It also helps when they go and splash however many hundreds of millions of pounds in the transfer window, if and when we get one, that they haven't furloughed staff and then gone and spent however many hundreds of millions of pounds. So I think from a PR point of view, United have got it spot on. So enough about COVID-19 and coronavirus. I think we're all a little bit sick of talking about that. So let's get on to the big news of the week, and it's regarding the man that all big news around United is regarding, I guess, Paul Pogba. This one isn't necessarily transfer news as we normally associate with Paul Pogba. There's a little bit more on that possibly later, but this one is to do with his issues with Graham Souness. So it's well documented. I think we've all seen it for ourselves. The way that Graham Souness absolutely slates Paul Pogba at every opportunity he gets. I mean, we've seen him this season against Everton, springs to mind, but it's probably happened more than just the once, where Paul Pogba has not been in the matchday squad, as he has not been for much of the season due to injury, and Graham Souness has still felt the need to bring his name up and then slate him for who knows what. The fact that he's not doing more. I'm surprised we haven't already heard of Graham Souness saying coronavirus is Paul Pogba's fault, because that is literally how ridiculous it gets with him. So basically it all started when the Manchester United podcast, the official podcast, was released on Monday, and they asked Paul about criticism from pundits. He said he doesn't really listen, and they asked him specifically about Graham Souness, I believe, and his response went something along the lines of, I'll be honest, I didn't know the name. I recognised the face, but I didn't know who he was. And the world just went into meltdown. On the one side of the fence, you'd got people calling Pogba disrespectful for not knowing who Souness is. And you've got other people who were saying, why would he know? I mean, let's think about it logically. Why would a boy born in the 90s in France that has no affiliations with Liverpool actually know who Graham Souness was? Apart from his Sky punditry that he openly admitted he doesn't listen to. It's like me, I'll be honest, I have met Des Bremner. Most of you probably won't know who he is. He won the European Cup in the centre midfield for Aston Villa. I don't really have any affiliation to Aston Villa. I was certainly not around. I was not born when Aston Villa won the European Cup. I did not know who Des Bremner was. Is that disrespectful of me? Is that bad of me? Because that's effectively what we're saying about Pogba. So I don't buy into this. It's disrespectful. I mean, I'd be surprised if Pogba knew who he was, apart from his Sky work. I'd also be really surprised if Graham Souness could actually name the first ever PSG captain, because that's effectively what we're asking Paul Pogba to do. Basically name a player that was around before he was born in a country he didn't even live in. So when we hear that side of it, that it's disrespectful, I think it's utterly mental. On basically the spat then escalated with obviously Graham Souness taking offence to Pogba saying, I don't know who he is, and saying, all right, we'll stick our medals on the table. An excellent, mature approach there from Graham Souness. Not only does Paul Pogba have a World Cup, obviously I didn't see much of Souness, but what I did see of Souness was him booting people, not the ball, people. So I think Pogba's a better technical footballer. I'll probably get clipped up and slated for that, but I think Pogba there's no question that he is a better footballer than Graham Souness was. And in terms of sticking the medals on the table to see who was better, isn't that exactly the thing that Liverpool have been arguing against when they say Steven Gerrard's better than Paul Scholes? Because if we apply that approach, let's stick your medals on the table. Paul Scholes has 11 Premier League medals and a couple of Champions Leagues, I believe. He might have retired by 2008. I can't fully remember off the top of my head. But at least he's got one Champions League, 13 Premier League medals. 11 Premier League medals, countless FA Cups and League Cups. Steven Gerrard's got a couple of Champions Leagues, probably a couple of FA Cups and League Cups. So the very fact that you've argued as Liverpool fans for years, it doesn't simply come down to medals, and then have one of your club legends say, let's decide who's better based on medals. I'll be honest, I find it just as hilarious as you saying you're going to furlough your staff, go back on it, and then want respect for doing that. It's just a joke, and a joke of a football club. Right, on to a bit of transfer news that's been happening this week. Jadon Sancho is obviously the big one and the massive one that Man United are looking at. Some reports are saying, as we said in the last podcast, a deal has been agreed for Jadon Sancho. Again, how true that is, I'm not sure, because there's other reports coming out of Germany saying Dortmund are happy to do business with United for Jadon Sancho. So how close the deal is, I'm not sure. I think it's a transfer that United are definitely interested in, and it's, I think, the one that they would pursue above all other transfers, because that, as we discussed in the last podcast, that is certainly an area that United need to strengthen, that right hand side. It's been unbalanced for years, and they certainly need to go and look at a player like Jadon Sancho. I mean, he's going to cost you about between 110 and 120 million, something around that figure. Other names that have been mentioned are, let me just find this, how you pronounce it, Upamecano. Dayot Upamecano. So this is the young defender from Leipzig. He had a trial at United when he was younger. United didn't take him on, deciding to focus on British talent at the time. I don't know a great deal about him. I know he's a ball-playing centre-half that's played at Leipzig for the last 3 years. They've been pretty solid at the back since he's been there, whether that is solely down to him or whether that is the team set up and the way the team play. I'm not sure. He's been linked to the host clubs across Europe. We're one of them. Arsenal, Real, Barca, Bayern. It's pretty much your usual suspects when you're looking at a top player in Europe, bar maybe Arsenal. It's been reported in Germany that Lothar Matthäus has urged Upamecano only to leave Leipzig if he's guaranteed football where he's going. He probably plays more often than not at United. I mean, I don't think Lindelof's as bad as people make out. We could possibly upgrade him, but it'd certainly be one of the better centre backs in the side still. I certainly think that Upamecano would be the long-term partner for Harry Maguire if we were to get him. But I don't think it's it wouldn't be top of the list in terms of a place to strengthen in the United side. Certainly wouldn't be top of the list. We're probably looking at a price of around 65 to 70 million to make a deal work. The other ones that the other major one that we've been linked with, bar Sancho and Upamecano, is coming out in the press lately, is Saul from Atletico Madrid. I've been a massive admirer of Saul for many years. I think he's an absolutely fantastic footballer. He's a cracking player. And I think he's suited for the Premier League. He's a bit like Ander Herrera in the sense that he's just tenacious. But he can also play a bit, as Ander Herrera could. He can also play a bit. He can pick a pass. He can score a goal. And I'd certainly take him at United. Eurosport are reporting that Atletico could be forced to sell Saul if they fail to make the Champions League. Whatever happens with that, like, who knows what's going to happen with the end of the season, who goes where, who makes what competition. In terms of him being sold, I don't know where Atletico are in La Liga. I haven't kept massively up to date with La Liga this season, so I don't know if it's likely that they're going to make the Champions League or not. But Saul signed a 6-year contract in 2017, I believe. Might have been a bit later. And in that contract, he had written a 136 million release clause. Now, it might seem like massive money, and I think this is another one. The Saul deal is another one that obviously depends on Paul Pogba moving. And we'll get, again, like I said, we'll get to him in a second. But just touching on the two main ones, or two that we were heavily linked with since January, really. It all seems to have gone quiet on the Jude Bellingham front. There's not much being reported about Bellingham and any sort of move. So I don't know what's happening with that. The other one that is pretty surprising is apparently United have said that they are not interested in Jack Grealish. Now, I think on the last podcast and an article that we've written on site about Jack Grealish, we have said that the understanding is that any deal for Jack Grealish would be dependent on Paul Pogba staying or going. If Paul Pogba stays, there's no deal for Grealish. If Paul Pogba goes, there's a deal for Grealish. And now we get to the man again, Paul Pogba. It's looking increasingly likely that he's going to stay. Whether that's because he wants to or because he has to is another question. In the podcast that he did with Manchester United, he seemed to say all the right things. But then again, you are on a podcast, an official podcast with your football club, your employer. You are going to say the right things. He's not a stupid boy. But I think it comes more down to, as what I think we mentioned in the last podcast, that there's nobody out there that's going to pay the money that United want for him. And I don't think there's anybody out there that's going to pay the wages that he wants, to be quite honest, especially coming off the back of a season in which you've played a handful of games because you've spent the entirety of it out injured. What I think it's time for Paul to do now is get his head down, show the United fans the player he can be, the player that they actually know he is, that they saw at Juventus and that we saw for France in the World Cup. Get your head down. Do what Bruno's doing. He's coming in, just set the place on fire, and we all expected that from Pogba. So if we can get those two balling in midfield with maybe that holding player, whether it be Saul, whether it be Fred, whether it be McTominay, Jadon Sancho, Martial, Rashford, that looks a dangerous team with goals all over it. Gone would be the days of, if you mark Rashford out of the game, we're sound from a defensive point of view and an opposition. I think those days will be long gone when you think defences will be going, right, well, if we mark Rashford out of the game, an on-form Tony Martial can ruin us, a Jadon Sancho can tear us apart, along with Bruno and Paul Pogba. That is just a nightmare for any defence. So, I mean, if the right money came in, I don't think it'd be a bad thing for Pogba to leave. But if we get no offer that's suitable for us, and what the club want for him, if he can get playing, that looks a tasty side. Especially bringing in maybe like an Upamecano to sit in next to Maguire. If not, Bailly or Lindelof, I think are both competent defenders. I think Lindelof's shown that this season in terms of the defensive record. We're second only to PSG across Europe's top 5 leagues for number of clean sheets. That's with David De Gea making a few errors. So I think this summer, when we finally know what's going to happen with it, could be another interesting one as last season was for United fans and United as a club. Bring in Sancho, either keep Pogba or bring in Saul. And I think the starting 11 will seriously challenge next season. Whether we've got enough squad depth to cope with the injuries like we've had this year is another question. But I think that starting 11 would certainly be capable of challenging for the league. I honestly believe that. So that is probably where we're going to wrap it up today. Check us out on www.rantsoveredevil.com for articles and more Man United news. And check us out on Twitter @RantDevil for, again, more news, little anecdotes. And until we get episode 3 recorded, We'll see you later.